In the enterprise space, we have a tendency to overcomplicate the simple and underestimate the complex. Nowhere is this more apparent than in our choice of sales frameworks. Most sales leaders are currently caught in a framework trap. They deploy spin selling when they should be using MEDDIC, or they obsess over MEDDIC checklists while their reps lose the ability to actually run a discovery call. It is the difference between an architect who knows how to use a spirit level and one who understands the structural integrity of the entire building. One is a tool, the other is a system. Today, we are going to dismantle the debate. We'll explore why SPIN remains the gold standard for uncovering implicated pain, but why it is utterly insufficient for managing a six-figure ACV deal in 2026. We will also look at the rigor of MEDDIC and why, if you haven't identified your economic buyer by the second stage of your pipeline, you aren't actually closing a deal. You're simply hoping for one. By the end of this deep dive, you'll have a unified blueprint, a way to synthesize the psychology of one with the operational discipline of the other. I'm Ms. Rahman, and this is the Revenue Architect. Let us begin with the foundation. Neil Rackham's SPIN selling was born from the analysis of 35,000 sales calls. It is not a set of tricks, it is an exercise in linguistic empathy. In markets where high-pressure pitching is often met with polite cynicism, SPIN is your most effective tool for lowering a prospect's guard. Why? Because it forces the seller to stop talking and start excavating. The genius of the SPIN sequence, situation, problem, implication, need-payoff, is that it mirrors the natural way a human being processes a change in their environment. Most sellers stop at the problem, they find a leak and immediately try to sell the plug. But an enterprise-level architect knows that a leak is merely a symptom. We must find the implication. This is where you quantify the cost of inaction. In latex terms, we are solving for the delta between the status quo, S0, and the optimized state, S1. However, here is the harsh reality for the modern business development leader. You can run a perfect SPIN discovery call, evoke massive emotional pain, and still watch the deal die in committee. Why? Because SPIN is a micro framework. It manages the conversation within the room, but it cannot manage the political, financial, and operational complexity outside the room. To navigate that complexity, to ensure the budget exists, the champion has teeth, and the board is aligned, you need more than a conversation guide. You need a checklist for the C-suite. And that brings us to the operational rigor of MEDDIC. Let's dismantle how to verify if a deal is actually real or if you're just having a very expensive chat. The rigor of MEDDIC. The rigor of MEDDIC. C sells. Now we pivot from the art of discovery to the science of verification. If SPIN is the conversation you have with your contact, MEDDIC is the report you give to your board. In complex enterprise deals, the biggest risk is not a no, it is a slow. It is the deal that lingers in your pipeline for 9 months before being quietly shelved because the decision process was never actually understood. Metrics, economic buyer, decision criteria, decision process, identify pain, champion is your diagnostic tool for structural integrity. Let's focus on the economic buyer. In a 200K deal, your contact, the one you had that lovely SPIN chat with, is likely a user or a gatekeeper. They have the authority to say no, but they do not have the budget to say yes. A revenue architect knows that until you have confirmed the metrics that matter to that economic buyer, you are merely a line item in a budget that is about to be cut. And then there is the champion, not just a fan of your product, but a person with power and influence who will sell on your behalf when you are not in the room. In 2026, the C in MEDDIC is the difference between a forecast you can bet on and a work of fiction. Without a champion, your deal is at the mercy of the decision criteria you didn't help write. The shift here is mental. You move from asking, do they like us, to asking, can they actually buy? One is a search for validation, the other is a search for structural flaws. But the real mastery isn't in choosing between SPIN and MEDDIC, it's in the hybrid delivery. Let's look at how to blend them into a single, unbreakable sales motion. We move now to the synthesis and final blueprint. So the question isn't SPIN or MEDDIC. That's a false dichotomy. The revenue architect asks, where are we in the build? In the early stages, you use SPIN to excavate the site. You find the pain, you quantify the implication, and you build the emotional case for change. You are the consultant, the teacher, the guide. But as the deal matures, as the average contract value ACV crosses that critical threshold, you must transition. You put on the hard hat and deploy MEDDIC. You stop empathizing and start stress testing. If you're still using SPIN tactics in month 4 of an enterprise cycle, you're missing the board. Conversely, if you lead a first meeting with MEDDIC interrogation, you'll never build the rapport required to find the I, the implicated pain. The 2026 blueprint is this: use SPIN to win the heart of the champion, and use MEDDIC to win the logic of the board. Aligning these two is what separates the high performers from the rest of the pack. In our next deep dive, we'll look at the third gear, business development ops, how to automate the hunting process so your reps spend more time in discovery and less time in data entry. If you found this breakdown useful, subscribe to the channel. We're building a community of revenue architects who value systems over stories. I'm Ms. Rahman, and this is the Revenue Architect. Check the description for the full MEDDIC to SPIN transition checklist. Let's get to work. I'll see you in the next deep dive.